I went back to Zonnebloem, and in what was standard 7 at the time, second year at high school, I came home one Friday afternoon, I removed my uniform, not knowing I was never going to wear it again, because my mother found us jobs in a factory, a printing industry. I was barely 15. So the Cape and Transvaal printers, they did like quick contract work, like phone books and Christmas cards and those sort of things. So you leave home quite early, come home after 9. And when I got the job, I thought, oops, I'm going to be an adult. I can wear makeup and high heels and what have you. After 1 week, I decided no, I wanted to go back to school. I didn't have the heart to tell her I want to go back to school. Anyway, I continued working. I got married and I didn't have the talent for marriage, so I skedaddled. So as I walked in, they said to me, you have to leave. So I said, why? Because it's for whites only. So there I have a manual, no typewriter, and I need to learn to type. So I took a piece of tracing paper and I traced the keyboard of the typewriter. It was in the book, and I learned to type on a piece of paper. I even ended up working at the Cape Herald. I was doing the reception work, and I liked the vibe and the gossip. And then they shoved me out. The woman who left was a white lady. She left, and I had to do the woman's page, which was called Bird Talk, right? And then they shoved me into courts. And I loved that because I was doing crime stuff, and it was like a whole different world for me. So my politicization came very late because I was still quite caught up with, when I was a youngster, we were at Zonnebloem and there was a march and I didn't know what this was about. And the highways got Philip Gosana Drive. He was leading the Sharpeville Massacre March in Cape Town. I got involved in organizations and I wanted to move on also, and I wanted to study. And I thought the only way I can do that is to get a job at UCT. But every time I phoned, I saw a job in the paper and they said to me, no, it's for whites only. So I thought, stuff this now. Eventually, so I got the job, and my job was I was secretary to a right-wing professor. I didn't really know, what was going on. Anyway, eventually I went and did my matric when I was 38. So I was quite involved, especially when the United Democratic Front came up. We did a lot of work. I worked in UCO, the United Women's Organization. But I kept my distance in terms, I didn't affiliate, and I wasn't. It's only when in 1994, in fact, by the time I finished my degree, I worked for another year. Then UCT and UWC, they advertised the same job, a faculty officer in education. Well, UCT wasn't going to give me that job. It was a white person's job. And I got the job at UWC. And while UCT is like my alma mater, I was more at home at UWC because it was a whole new vibe for me. So I stayed there for 4 years, I think. Then but I was doing a lot of, I had to do part-time work because my salary just wasn't helping me pay for everything. So I got involved in oral history projects, and I've been doing that since the 1970s. So I've done most of, the Exiles, their history, Robben Island, those, if you go into the prison cells, there'll be those little things that you switch on and you can listen to a prisoner speak. I did all that. So I did And I'm actually passionate about history also. I just kept journals always. I used to write down bits of things on paper and shove it in a drawer somewhere and find it 10 years later. So I was asked to come and help on the elections, the 1994 elections. And I got called into the command center, and my victim complex kicked in. What did I do? You know, because if you go into the command center, you're actually in trouble. So I'm standing at the door and I'm looking at all these big wigs who were sitting there. They were farting and arguing who makes the biggest fart and who's all that kind of crap. And all they wanted me to do was to organize the tea for Mandela on the Sunday. And I'm thinking I'm in trouble. So as I left the office, I wrote on a piece of paper the date, the time, and to think these farts are going to run the country. That's what I wrote down. I found it years later, sitting in the drawer somewhere. So I kept journals, and eventually I was going to dump it. And then I thought, you know, maybe I should just give it one more chance. I used to transcribe I used to type people's essays. And I was very interested in what they were doing. And then through the history department, I got to transcribe interviews that they did. And along came Robben Island as well. So I did a lot of, that's how my relationship started with the Oral History Project. I just kept on doing it because it was also helping me financially. And it's a crappy job, very crappy job, but I've been lucky. I've had interesting interviews. All the stuff, most of it, 98% I would say, they were all interesting. So I still do that for the District 6 Museum. UCT has already thrown me off their database because I'm too old. And I thought, so be it. But for me, the oral histories must continue. And if anything, if I can push that area, I will push that because it needs to come out. So that we can, we live in an intolerant society. We don't understand each other. So unless I know where you come from, I can then relate. We know so it makes life a little bit easier if you understand people. Well, I did Pittman shorthand, and the Boer couldn't read that, you see. So I could take copious notes and then go and do it, or translate that into words and what have you. So that was a skill that I kind of kept, and I was good at taking minutes at meetings, you know. We were somewhere, and I also had to be careful about that because they would make a point of taking that to somebody else to decipher. But fortunately with Pittman's, everybody's style is different. So I can't necessarily read because we develop our own style, right? So, but we also had to be careful because there's no way that they're going to leave you sitting there, because they want to know what you're doing. And when they asked me one day what it was, I said, no, I want to do art one day, you know? So I would color the things in and use different colors in the pens. You know, you had to do, like Pittman's has got a soft stroke and a hard stroke. Like a B would be that. P would be soft. So you use pencils really. So you had to be very careful. And I don't know sometimes how I actually got away with that sort of thingy, but it worked for me. So I never got into trouble, you know. They raided a house when I lived up here in Woodstock once and took all my books. They didn't pick me up, but they just took the books. So we're looking at women in the 50s and the 60s. And I can only admire them. They were doing so much against such a lot of odds. And patriarchy is there, it's still there today. They don't get enough recognition. So I think of the Priscilla Janas and all those people who, and even Freeney Jean Waller, right? I had such a, what's his name? I just admired that woman because she was an intellect of note. But she ruffled my feathers and I threatened to beat her up with her sari. Because she didn't have people skills. And I came over, we were in Joburg and we were doing, I had to do my minutes for the meeting. I worked for the NEC, the National Executive Committee. And I thought, this woman is getting to me now. So instead of doing my minutes, I write her a letter. And it was fax days still. Send the fax off to her house. She waddles into the office the Monday. And she says, Pat, I got your letter. Can we talk about it? So I said, no. I told you everything in the letter. I said, you had freedom of movement, speech, just about everything. We face the tear gas and the bullets here. So don't treat us like idiots. You know, that woman, afterwards, she became like, everybody was like thinking, you're the only one who would actually, I said, yes, because who does she think she is? I admired her for, you know, her intellect, and she was really good. But she didn't know how to deal with people. And here we're working on the ground. And this is another thing about a whole lot of women who work on the ground. They're not sitting on platforms and looking for big sort of titles. And they get trodden on. And I just think that's not right. It is time that they started recognizing what women are capable of doing. And for that reason, I mean, I really admire the Dorothy Mashlangus and, you know, all those, because I worked with them. You know, we would get to meetings, we would exchange ideas, we would exchange publications or help each other understand stuff. It was basically, when I think about it now, it's actually difficult to answer because it seems like nothing, but it's actually something. You need to read, because if you don't read, you will never understand. And as I say, I didn't always enjoy reading everything I did, but then I got advice on that. So you need to know what's happening in the world, and especially in the country. You need to understand your history. You need to know where you come from. You need never to forget where you come from, because that's what people do. They go for material things. I don't say I didn't go for material things, but that happens. You need to know yourself. You need to know your people around you. So that you can, and you need to understand how they operate, how their minds work, and that is one way of getting in there and helping them.